Welcome to Maine, we're stretched to the bone. Prices keep rising, the paycheck stays prone. Inflation keeps knocking, won't leave us alone. They're selling the lie, groceries climbing, the gas tank is low. The bill's hitting harder than snow, but silence still blankets the truth. Where does it go? They're selling the lie. Housing is gridlocked from Portland to the county. Workers commute far past what feels soundly. Talk of solution comes yearly, not loudly. They're selling the lie. They're selling the lie. Say every voice counts, but watch who gets lifted. Some stories vanish, some get the spotlight shifted. Depends on what trends and what keeps them gifted. They're selling the lie. Between static and spin, drown the signal again. Nothing is what it seems. I wanna believe you, but every headline turns daylight into redesigned skies. Facts get twisted, context missing. We choke on the simplified alibis. Wanna believe you, but all I see is shadows where the answer should shine. The fact is fiction.
Welcome to the Muddy Waters Podcast, where Mainers tell their stories, unfiltered.
Good morning. This is the Muddy Waters Podcast, episode 148, if you can believe it. And I'm your host, Chuck Ellis, and I'm joined today with reporter for the Maine Wire, Jon Fetherston. Thank you for joining us, Jon.
Hey, good morning, Chuck. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to join you.
Yeah, well, after seeing some of the places that you've been, I feel honored that you would still come join the lowly, humble Muddy Waters Podcast.
Hey, come on. What are you talking about? I just left the Ray Richardson show, and everybody was talking. Everybody was praising you. Lauren LePage was there, and they were praising how great the Muddy Waters podcast is. So, thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the praise. Obviously, we are here because similar to why obviously the Maine Wire exists. Although you guys are doing much more than our humble podcast that I do here. But yeah, we exist because the mainstream media doesn't want to tell the truth about what's happening, and so we're so thankful for people like you, Steve, and some of the other reporters over at the Maine Wire who are actually going and asking difficult questions of our legislators, of our governor, of all these people. We're not getting answers necessarily, but at least we're not from them anyway. But at least we're asking the questions and doing that, investigative, reporting that is really what journalism is all about, I believe, right?
It's what I was always taught. Ask questions and let people answer them, and hold people accountable with your questions. And Maine has seemed to have lost that way. It's very surprising to me when I watch what I will call mainstream media, but I don't even think it's fair to call them mainstream media anymore. But let's call it TV media. And I don't see people asking questions. I don't see people asking accountability. Listen, if you don't like the Maine Wire, or you don't like, Jon Fetherston or Steve Robinson, or, some of our other reporters' style of reporting news, but it's still news, and you're not seeing, the scandals being reported, about MaineCare fraud, Medicare fraud, autism, fraud bill. How many people in Maine know that the federal government has put Maine on record at saying, you've got some explaining to do with with your autism care billing? We're talking millions of dollars, multiple millions of dollars, the government wants their money back because things have been misbilled. Governor Mills immediately discounted it and said, that the federal government was picking on her. Well, when you have a report that is audited and 100% of the audit findings come back and say there were billing misregularities, that's not picking on somebody. That's holding them accountable. But you're not seeing it being reported. You're not seeing it being investigated by anybody other than the Maine wire. So you have to question, why is that, Chuck?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, especially because my understanding is there are even some local news outlets that are supposedly owned by conservatives. I've been told some of the bigger like television news stations that are here in Maine. One of them, anyway, I'd heard is the Sinclair Group, doesn't something like that own one of the TV stations here? Anyway, most of them obviously are controlled by Soros funded media, but even some of these other ones that, again, I've not like corroborated that. I've not looked into that, but my understanding was one of them was owned by like or at least had some influence from a conservative organization. So yeah, why are we not reporting on this stuff? And it's obvious that, like, I don't know about that group that I was just mentioning, but it's obviously when it comes to, like, you know, the Bangor Daily News or the Portland Press Herald, or like, they're literally being paid to not tell the truth, essentially. Supposedly the money is going for promotion of whatever, but like, ultimately, when you're getting millions of dollars from the Mills administration, you're not going to report bad things about them, because then the money dries up.
100%. And you have to question, why would any government agency pay a media organization millions of dollars if they didn't think they were going to get something out of it? And, you know, it just reeks of conflict of interest. It reeks of transparency. But if you're an editor in one of those newsrooms, you're going to have to say, hey, listen, don't write anything to upset the apple cart, because that $2.4 million that the Bangor Daily News gets from the Mills administration probably keeps the doors open and the lights on. And that should be scary, because hopefully, like, when we have a new governor, that, you know, my words, that is a Republican governor after the election, is that $2.4 million still going to go to the Bangor Daily News? The answer is it better not. So what happens to the Bangor Daily News? Do they go out of business, or do they find another funding source? $2.4 million is a lot of money, and it probably, you know, keeps the lights on there. So do they go out of business? And, you know, independent journalism outlet like the Maine Wire, you know, we're growing, we're thriving, you know, we're going to be adding more and more stuff. So it proves that, you know, people want, you know, an independent news source. They want investigations. Just look at, you know, how our Graham Pollard, our digital media guy, has been able to grow our social media. Our Facebook page is huge. Our Instagram page is growing. Our X account is growing. We have a TikTok page now too. And people really seem to be getting a lot of their content from our social media pages. And, you know, I think it's just, you know, the tip of the iceberg. We're going to even grow more and more as we go. And we're, you know, I think if you look at all of our combined numbers between our social media, our Maine Wire television, which, if people aren't aware, we do Maine Wire TV every day from 4 to 5. We talk about the issues of the day. I think if you look at our combined social media numbers between YouTube and our social media accounts, we're probably beating a lot of the local newscasts even right now, just by driving out our content.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I think that we are an older state, and there's still a lot of people that are still, and this is one of the concerns that I have for us in going into 2026, is that we still are this older state, even though, you know, I think I brought this up when I was on the radio with Ray yesterday. Even though people don't trust the mainstream media, they still largely, either directly or indirectly, tend to get their information from them. Right, especially your older populations. They have I think there's a shift here. There are a lot of older people on Facebook, which gives us some hope, and I think that's where some of them are going to get their information. But a lot of older people still tend to get their information from CNN or Fox News, right? And then they watch the local news, and I think there's still more of a belief among older people that the local news is actual news. There's this, it's nonsense. And I think there is some skepticism and rising skepticism but like I'm very thankful that we have a competing news source in the Maine Wire that's actually getting into that kind of like, here are the things that have gone on today. It's funny, before you guys started that up, I was like, I'm gonna see, you and I had talked about having you come on like on a weekly basis to kind of do like a weekly update on like what the heck has been going on in our state, which is why we're here today. But I think getting that regular content, because like they are literally broadcasting. I don't know. Do they do like a noon segment on the mainstream media? I don't know. I haven't watched the news in so many years that I don't even know. But I know that they do like a morning and then an evening at the very least. So we have to work, which is part of the reason, again, this podcast is here, to get more content out there, in front of people, so that they can hear the counter narrative. And what's one of the beauties of like the Maine Wire and conservative media in general is that it's honest media, right? The liberal media doesn't call itself the liberal media. They claim that they're nonpartisan. They claim that they're independent, and the reality is that they are all like, again, a propaganda arm of the Democrat Party. So you can speak to any of that, but I'd also like to hear like what are the things, even here in Maine, it's hard to keep up at this point with all the different fraud things that are going on in the 24-hour news cycle. So what are like the biggest things that have been happening here in Maine over the course of the last week or so?
Well, let me circle back a little bit and put a period on the news. I've been associated with news for, probably close to 30 years. And one little subtle twist that people who aren't, like neurotic like I am, don't notice. Newscasts are no longer referred to as newscasts. They're referred to as shows now. And it's a subtle switch, but it used to be a newscast or a news center or, the 6 o'clock news. Now it's a show. And a show is different than the news because, Walter Cronkite is not on your television anymore, bringing you just the news. And now it's produced. It's, it's visually stimulating. It looks good, usually delivered by, good looking people and stuff like that. But there isn't a lot of meat on the bone anymore. And it's a show now. And I don't want to see a show. I want to know what's going on. I want to know what the weather's going to be. And I want to know what the most important thing is going on in my state. And you don't get that from your local news anymore. To that point, what is going on in the state? First, kudos to you. You did the Cumberland County dinner a couple of weeks ago where you had Steve Robinson as your featured speaker. And Steve highlighted, during that speech, and I thought it was a great speech, and you guys did a great job with that dinner, is that you've got fraud, you've got systematic fraud in this state. And I have said, let's stop calling it fraud because it is fraud. But what it is really, it is blatant theft of Chuck's, John's, and anybody who is watching this podcast, taxpayer dollars. And the fact that nobody is standing up and going, what is going on here? We have hundreds of millions of dollars of fraud in the state of Maine. It's an election year. It should be an issue that every candidate is talking about, Democrat, Republican. And I got to be fair, I don't hear a lot of it. But if you go to the Maine Wire, search our page. Steve put up a map of where all of these MaineCare billing irregularities are. They're so irregular that they don't make sense. So it makes you think that there is some fraud. We've undercovered fraud with, with Gateway Communities. We've gone to other home health care agencies and found people not there, but billing millions of dollars back to the state. It's a real issue. And it's a polarizing issue, and it should be a campaign issue that everybody should be talking about. But I'm not seeing any. I'm not seeing any chatter on both sides of the aisle on this issue, and it should be a big issue because I don't know if you saw it because I know you were away for a couple of weeks, Chuck. Dr. Oz put the state of Maine on blast. Said, hey, you got 30 days to explain these billing irregularities, or we're coming and we want our money back. And we're talking, $24 million worth of money the federal government wants back. And I think we're about 14 days into that 30-day notice. So really, if Maine lawmakers aren't going to fix it, trust me, the federal government's going to come in here and fix it. I think you'll hear about fraud tonight during the State of the Union address. I think President Trump will actually put Maine on blast tonight as well during the State of the Union address, and that should tell you everything that you need to know. I mean, if the feds have to come in and clean up your mess, then the mess must be pretty bad.
Yeah, somebody just put in the comments just for fun that they have time card fraud and MSA D60. I guess grants can't be tracked once received. What a mess. Anyway, yeah, lots of nonsense going on in our state. I was watching you guys a clip of one of your investigative reporting things that happened, I think, while I was gone, where you went to a home healthcare place because you received word that one of the people who had been served there was not being taken care of, was being taken care of by a bunch of people who could not at the time speak English. Although when you were there, they had sent over some people who could communicate, I think, if I'm not mistaken. That was pretty, because this is beyond fraud. That's like abuse, right? Isn't that, and not even financial abuse. That's like potential abuse of elderly people by not, or neglect, I think is probably a better word than abuse.
What we found with that report was a sparsely furnished house that was cold, was not clean. The resident had told us that he had bought bananas and they had frozen in his room because his room was so cold. So your room has to be below 30 degrees for your produce and your vegetables to freeze. The man had some certainly hygiene issues, and when questioned about it, they became immediately defensive and tried to get us to leave, even though we were invited in by the residents. It was very, very disturbing. And then even last week, I ended up going back to their corporate offices, and I was with Robert Wessels, who's running for governor. And they actually called the police on us after telling us, "Hey, can you wait out in the lobby for a couple minutes?" And then they so much wanted us to wait to give them time for the police to show up. And we were just there to ask, simple, basic questions. And what does it tell you when they're videotaping me and threatening me inside the house, telling me to leave even though I was invited guest? And then when I go to their office to ask them questions, they call the police. That's not typical normal behavior. So what are they hiding? Why don't they want to know? If I ran in an organization and somebody had questions, I'd probably set up a meeting and say, "Hey, can you come back on Tuesday, 2:00 or something like that?" Set it up, have some structure to it. But I certainly wouldn't call the police and try to hide things.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff there. Like, obviously, like, I've worked for organizations that would basically tell people not to say anything, no comment, no comment,
Sure.
no comment, right? Like, that makes sense. And then put out a statement, right? Like, this is typically what the organization would do. They would put out a statement preemptively, and they would say, if anybody comes to you, say no comment, direct comments up to this person, right? And that person would probably likely say little to nothing as well. But outside of like the official published statements. But the type of behavior that you're suggesting, that this seems like people who know they've done wrong, and that they're going to be found out, and just are trying to kind of panicking and trying to hide what's happened and make sure we don't get to the bottom of it if they can help it, which it seems like when you're dealing with this is, again, to a degree, I would say this is a separate issue from fraud. This is a neglect of patients and stuff like that, but it's in the same category of people taking advantage of a system. They know that they can find a way to get money from the government for taking care of and being a provider of people, and then they just don't do a good job at that work. And no, it was a lot of the fraud that has been being uncovered, especially in Lewiston, is connected to Somali organizations. Was this also a Somali-run organization, or is this just another or do we know anything about the people who are running that facility?
I don't know the nation of origin for the CEO of the company, but they definitely fall into the new Mainers category. Yes, absolutely they do. But Chuck, the biggest takeaway for me is after we reported this and we released the videos, and if between total social media presence, we probably have 1 million views on that video. Between all of our social media platforms. I've called the Department of Health and Human Services 7 times trying to get somebody on the phone to talk to me about this situation, to report this situation. I've left messages, sent emails. Do you think I've heard back from anybody? That's the biggest scandal. That's the biggest scandal is, hey, go to the video, look at the video. The video tells the story. You make up your own mind. You make up your own decisions. But here's a news organization reaching out to the Mills administration saying, I think you might have a problem. You might want to look at it. And the fact that nobody's picked up the phone and said, hey, can you give me your side of the story? Can you give me, tell me what you saw or what you see or what your concerns are? You can't tell me the Mills administration is not aware of our reporting on this subject. And more importantly, if you're a government official not interested in protecting the vulnerable, which is the core value of what government's supposed to do, then I have to really question, why are you in leadership in government? Because you've got a problem on your hands. And it's not just one isolated incident. I've been to many, many places. I've found a lot of things. We're working on some more things, that we're going to come out in the next coming days as well, too. But where's the governor on this? Where is leadership? Where is the Department of Health and Human Services on this? If it's just one case, it's one too many. But I can tell you it's a lot more than one case.
Yeah, and to your point, like I obviously, like, so my wife is East African. Like, the point, like, even though the left loves to call everything that we do racist, this has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that people are taking advantage, and there are certain cultures that people come from that they're going to look for those opportunities. But the bigger issue is who's allowing that to happen. Who's supposed to be, who are the ones that are supposed to be the checks and the balances? You're giving money from the government to people to take care of people, and you're not ensuring that those people are actually being taken care of. So sure, shame on the people who own those organizations and are running them and are profiting off of it. But the bigger shame is actually on our state government. And really, as you're saying, the Department of Health and Human Services and Governor Mills and everybody in the administration, as well as the entire legislature, like the legislature, the people representing us, right? They're supposed to be one of the checks against this, right? They're supposed to be raising these types of issues and putting into place legislation that ensures that these types of things don't happen. People don't get taken advantage of. People aren't, in vulnerable situations and being used and abused, or in this case, I would say neglected, all in order to make a profit. I know a number of years ago, and this was all under the Mills administration as well, if I'm not mistaken, right? One of the challenges, so from a previous life, I ran into a number of people who were starting home health organizations, and they were all from my memory, the people that I was talking to were all Congolese, right? And they're all coming in talking about how they can make good money, and they're all starting these home healthcare industries. They're starting them here in Maine, Indiana, Arizona, a number of other places, but primarily those 3 come to mind. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I thought I heard a lot of reports that a lot of home healthcare organizations were closing down in Maine because the reimbursement rate from the state wasn't enough to be able to cover, the cost of paying their employees. And so how are all these people coming in saying that they're going to do this while being able to make money off of it? And I think the concern, obviously, there is that, like, it's not able to actually be profitable in order to cover costs. And so in order for it to make it work, people are having to cut corners, which it sounds like is part of the problem that led to the situation that you were dealing with, right? And so it's still as a result of this, what opened the door to this is not having appropriate. I'm all about saving money on taxes and not overspending, but if we're providing services, we need to at least be giving enough money for those services to be able to be provided, right? And that's one of the faults that has happened. Somehow Mills is spending record amounts of money, but not taking care of some of the core essentials of where, if we are going to be spending money, we need to be spending money.
100%. And the rules are so laxed in Maine, which I find to be stunning, is that you and I, we could open up a home health care agency today called Chuck and John's Home Health Care. Let's call it Chuck and John's Home legit home health care. And I could take care of you, and you could take care of me, and we could bill the state every month saying that I'm taking care of you and you're taking care of me. And it would take the state about 2 years to realize, wait a minute, Chuck is young and, he can probably take care of himself. And John is older and he's getting old, but he's still able to take care of himself. Let's just send them a strongly worded letter saying that, we're going to look into this. And it's going to take 6 months to look into it. So now you're 2 years, 6 months into it and find out, whoa, wait a minute. John and Chuck's legitimate home health care wasn't really all that legitimate. Let's start, holding them accountable and pull back some of that money. Well, they'll put you on a payment plan to pull back some of that money, but in the meantime, you and I will just shut down our home healthcare business and open it up under a different name and another, corporation name, and we'll still continue to bill. And the government knows that this is happening. The government is aware of it. The federal government is aware of it, but they're not stopping it. They're not fixing it. And I know it's probably too, easy to say. Shut it down for everybody. Have everybody reapply. If you really want to clean up the fraud, have everybody, reapply and reestablish the rules. But until you do that, you're still going to have this blatant theft. We've uncovered stories where people have billed millions of dollars, and when they got caught, they just closed their business, close up shop, either leave the state or leave the country, and nobody's in handcuffs. Nobody's in jail. Nobody's being held accountable. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? And it's just one man's opinion, is a lot of these NPOs, nonprofit organizations, were established under the Mills administration in an effort to grow MaineCare. And in the process of growing MaineCare and millions of dollars flowing to these NPOs, the Democrat-led majority and the governor is asking those NPOs to then say, hey, it's an election year. I need your people to come out and hold signs. I need your people to come out and organize fundraisers. I need your people to send us money as a payback for us allowing this process to go on. Because if it's not that, then nothing else makes any sense. And that is the ultimate layer of corruption.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, it's to me, the more and more I learn about what's actually going on in our state and what our government is doing and what they're not doing, the more, it just feels so unbelievable that this could be allowed to happen to this degree. And I think that the part that really gets me is now that it's coming into the light, like they're not doing anything about it. They're trying to find ways to keep doing business as usual. Like in some situations, like it doesn't seem like they have any desire to stem the tide of a lot of this nonsense. Instead, they're mad at the Maine Wire for reporting on it. Right? That's their response, is to get mad at anybody who's talking about it, rather than be like, yeah, you're right, crap, we screwed up. Like, even if they were silently, quietly putting in reforms to ensure that this didn't happen, that would be something. Mm-hmm. It would be like, well, it's not as, you need to come clean, but it's more like they're just sitting there saying that there's nothing wrong. There's just this conservative blog, as they like to say. I just love that ridiculous quote from Shenna. But they're just suggesting that there's some wacky conservatives that are making stuff up or whatever. But the truth is, obviously the federal government's paying attention. It's not them picking on Janet Mills. It's them recognizing the fraud and all of the issues that exist in our state, and looking to address them, which like what happens if the government starts clawing back that money? Where's the state? What's the state government going to do? Because they only seem to know how to spend money. And if you take some of the money back, I don't like, they've already taxed us all the way up, all the way to the top. Like, I don't know what other taxes they could put into place. I say that, and there was a joking one that came out a couple of weeks ago suggesting that they were going to force people to register their lawnmowers, which fortunately that was not true. But I guess maybe they could do something like that. But where are they going to get the money from if the federal government turns off the spigot a little bit because of all the fraud here? What are they going to do?
It's a great question, and I don't think they have an answer to it. I honestly don't. And Janet Mills promised that she was going to send in everybody a $300 vote for me check. Or how is she going to be able to afford those? I mean, because the money's going to have to come from the rainy day fund. And if she sends out those $300 checks, and then the federal government wants $28 million just on one issue back,
right?
What's that rainy day fund going to look like? And and is Janet Mills even going to care? Because it's my prediction. This is the last year of Janet Mills being an elected official in Maine. I don't see her winning her Senate race. She's term limited for her governor's spot. So she's just going to walk away. The rainy day fund will be empty, and the Maine taxpayers will be footing the bill. And like you said, they're going to have to raise revenue somehow to pay for all this. And,
or cut spending, which they don't seem to. The Democrats don't seem interested, and obviously, if we get a conservative in there, we can do that. But with liberals,
even then, that's going to take a couple of years, before you start seeing effects. Yeah. Yep. I mean, I pray that it happens, but you're even seeing it right now with the current the Trump administration. He's cut programs. He's cut a lot of waste. He's cut a lot of fraud. He's raised a tremendous amount of money with his tariffs. And you still go to the grocery store, it's still expensive. You still, fill up your car. It's less than it was. Don't get me wrong. And thank you for doing it. But, it takes time to, turn that ship around, because, a lot of people forget how much money was pumped into the system during COVID. Don't forget, people were getting paid an extra $600 a week not to go to work. That money takes a long time to flush out of the system. It takes a long time for it to readjust. And, if we don't start cutting spending, if we don't start, sharpening our pencil on budgets, we're not going to be able to afford it, and especially if the Republicans don't win the midterms, the Trump administration will be all for naught. All the positive steps, that have happened in the last, 14 months are all going to be for naught, because if we don't keep the House and the Senate, it's just going to be impeachment, for the next 2 years. Trump is bad. Affordability will no longer be on the table, and things will be chaotic. So, I mean, this next election is very, very important, not only for Maine, but for the rest of the country.
Yeah, and speaking of elections, it's worth noting that today, February 24th, there is a special election going on in Lewiston. If you're in Lewiston, get out and vote for Janet Bowden. Janet Bowden has been fighting for the people of Lewiston for a long time already. She's been on the school board for a number of years, and she's raised issues at the city council. She's even being on the school board testified to the school board. And she's a great, excellent candidate. I had the opportunity to interview her here on the podcast. If you're in Lewiston, make sure you get out and vote today. If you haven't already voted, we have a chance to reduce the margin in the House and make her an incumbent, which will make it easier for her to then get reelected this November. And so get out, vote for Janet. Please take the time. If you know somebody who lives in Lewiston, let them know that they need to get out and vote because we need that seat. And as I said, she's an excellent candidate, calling out the nonsense that's been going on in Lewiston for a number of years at this point.
Well, let me call out the lunacy as well, too. She's running against a city councilor by the name of Scott Harriman. He's currently sits on the city council, and he is the city council's appointee to the school committee. And listen, I try not to make things personal or anything, but You know, what I saw with my own eyes a week ago when I was sitting in the audience at the Lewiston City Council meeting, you had a Lewiston shooting victim, Benjamin Dyer, who was shot 5 times during the tragedy. He's lost the use of his hand, lost his bicep and tricep and his arm. And he's addressing, you know, the Lewiston City Council. And he stops when he realizes that Scott Harriman, who is today Janet Bowden's opponent in the election for state rep, is not looking at him and doodling on a piece of paper and not making eye contact with him, so much that Mr. Dyer says, "Hey, look at me." And Harriman says, don't tell me to do what to do with my body. If you don't have the self-respect to look at a man who survived one of the greatest tragedies in the history of Maine, I do have to call into question your judgment for higher office, though. I mean, I was in the room. I was just stunned and stupefied by it. You know, Mr. Harriman was censored earlier by, you know, the Lewiston City Council for his use of, you know, the Signal app. Man openly admits that, you know, he publicly urinates in parking garages. It does call into question Harriman's electability. And I just pray that Janet is successful in her efforts today.
Yeah, absolutely. On the one hand, you have an incredible candidate. On the other hand, you have an obvious, like, yeah, not. I mean, I can't even imagine that having the lack of respect to and you know, I don't know what the other word is for, but to have somebody who's a victim of the Lewiston shooting who shot 5 times and not even do them the courtesy of giving them your attention. And that is that's pretty rotten. So get out, vote for Janet.
I don't think you can get any lower than that.
Janet Bowden, that is. Vote for Janet Bowden. Don't vote for the other Janet. Anyway, vote for Janet Bowden of Lewiston. So, but yeah, no, going back to your point, we really have to win the midterms. You know, it becomes a scary place. So, you know, one of the problems we sometimes have on the right is that, like, things aren't perfect, and so we just look for every opportunity to get mad about something that our own side is doing, and attack one another. And it's like, I had a conversation with some people recently, and I was like, look, we are on the same team. We are going up against the radical left, which is going to destroy our children, destroy our country, all this stuff. We cannot afford to get sidetracked by and forget who the real enemy is. Yes, maybe we've got some problems within our own party, absolutely, but they're nothing by comparison with what's going on the radical left. We need to come together. We need to make sure we show up and vote. We need to volunteer our time, energy, effort, whatever it might be. And so we need to like put that stuff aside, stop, you know, these purity tests, and get out there and help conservative candidates, because we absolutely have to win this year.
We have no choice. I mean, if you don't put a flag in the ground this election cycle, there might not be a ground to put a flag into in the next one. I mean, it's, you know, I mean, it's, you know, it's fair to say the country is divided, and I don't like to say that the country is divided, but I mean, you do have your, you know, woke radical agenda where, you know, grooming children in schools is acceptable, which is just like mind-boggling to me that you could do that. Or you don't want to protect, you know, girls and you know, you want men to play in girls' sports. You don't, but there are people that do it. I mean, you see these anti-ICE rallies, these, you know, no king rallies. They don't make any sense to me, but you can't deny that they do exist, and they do, you know, do have influence and stuff. And if you just want to go back to, you know, education being about reading, writing, and arithmetic, you know, you got to get involved in these next elections, because when was the last time you heard a school committee talking about education? You talk about, you know, woke agendas, you talk about the furry phenomenon, you talk about, you know, breast binders, you're talking about, you know, anti-ICE rallies being hosted by schools. Can kids read and write anymore? And I think that the data says that they don't do it as well as our, you know, as my generation or your generation does, Chuck. And isn't that concerning?
Very concerning. I think that it was like 1 in 4 or 1 in 5, or no, wait, yeah, I think it was like 1 in 4 fourth graders can read at level. I think was one of the things that I'd heard. Something as crazy as that. 1 in
How's that
3 or 1 in
acceptable
4.
in the United States of America? I mean, it's not acceptable.
It's not, and there are stories of kids coming over from other countries in East Africa and being the head of their class simply because they actually got decent education where they came from. And I think like we are really doing a disservice to our kids. But to go back to your point that you said earlier, because I think like sometimes I don't like that this in a sense that this is when I'm getting involved in politics, and part of it, I say getting involved. I guess I've been involved for about 4 years now, but part of it is that like we're saying things that I feel like we always say, but like now we mean it, and it's like sometimes it's like you can only cry wolf so many times before people stop hearing you. And so I just want to highlight like when you say that like if you don't put a flag in the ground, we might not have ground to put it in. It's easy for people to say, yeah, every year they say that, right? 2024 was one of those moments. Absolutely 100%. Like if Trump doesn't win, I don't know if we have a country left. The Democrats would have continued to take away our freedoms, would have continued to silence free speech. They literally were talking about how necessary it is to be able to limit speech, like they're doing in the UK. So that was coming, right? So that was real. This is like, and this one again, because they're still after Trump nationally, and they will ruin the rest of his presidency and with all these impeachment scandals. And here in the state of Maine, if we don't win, like just because of the way that the state of Maine goes, like our demographics have been shifting. A lot of your more conservative minded people have been moving out of the state. A lot of liberals have been moving into the state. This is a reality, right? If we don't win, that's going to continue. Number one, but number two, you're like generally speaking, a governor in Maine serves 8 years. So like, let's say there is hope down the road. We're looking at another 8 years. This is a big deal. I mean, technically they have to go run for re-election 4 years in, but I think going back, I don't know, 40 years or so, Maine governors will generally tend to serve 2 terms. That's just what generally tends to happen. And so it's highly probable that if the Democrats win again, we're looking at another 8 years before we can make any serious change. Think about all the problems that the Democrats have brought to our state: transgender treatment of minors, abortion all the way up until birth, not caring about actual education, but focusing on DEI, CRT, BLM, whatever it is, all these other secondary socio-emotional learning, which is not learning, that's teaching kids how to be victims. Like there's so much stuff that they're doing here in our state, not to mention the economics, like, which is, I think, one of the biggest one. Most people vote with their pocketbook. One of the biggest ones, the economic situation in the state of Maine. We are reducing regularly the number of like businesses that exist in this state outside of ones that are defrauding the government. But the actual business, there's tons of businesses have closed down since COVID here in our state, and new businesses are not coming here. So the jobs environment, we're one of the most expensive places to live, especially when you factor in the average income here in the state of Maine. These problems are just going to continue to get worse for 8 years. And I think most of your poorer people will either get to the point where they're dependent on the state, or they'll leave the state and will be replaced by liberal elites who want our coastline. They probably mostly own our coastline at this point, but they also want all the lakes and mountains and all that other kind of stuff. And the Mainer will have to either become poverty stricken and dependent on the state, or leave for greener pastures. I mean, that like it really is that dark if we don't win. We have to work hard. We have to get out there. We have to convince people.
Well, Chuck, I am a election day voter, and I probably always will be. But I think it's also fair to say that in 2026, it's never been easier to vote in Maine or the United States of America, between early voting, mail-in voting, and I don't support any of those. Like I said, I believe in going to the ballot box and posting my ballot, but they exist and we should use it. And the Republicans should embrace early voting and, voting by mail. I haven't seen a lot of that, But my point is you've got Janet Bowden running today in the special election in Lewiston. I think we would be shocked and disappointed by what the voter turnout's going to be in that election.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is an important election. So my question is, if it's easier to vote now in 2026, why are we going to tolerate probably a 20% voter turnout today in Lewiston? Because elections do matter, but that means 80%. If it is 20%, and I hope it's higher, and I wouldn't be shocked if it's actually lower, but that means 80% of the voting public who are affected by all decisions said, I'm too busy. I don't have time. I can't do that. Oh, when's the election? Oh, it was Tuesday. That's the real problem, is how do you engage that base to say, listen, I know you're busy. I know you're working a double shift, but did you vote? Why didn't you vote? Because it used to be a time that you wouldn't even tell anybody who you voted for, but you told people you voted, and now people aren't even voting. And isn't that scary? And how is you as a Republican leader, Chuck? How can you change that in Maine and throughout the country?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that I keep coming back to is one of the challenges we have as a Republican Party is that we don't have the trust of the average person, right? We don't, unfortunately, and some people within the Republican Party don't like me saying these things because they think it makes us look bad, or it makes it think that it's going to hurt their ability to like get people out to vote and engage people. But I think it's important for us to speak truth, right? And not trying to hurt. I'm trying to help ultimately. And the recognition of the fact that we do not have the trust of the people. We don't have the trust of our own base. This is part of the problem. And again, part of it is some of you out there are just too negative and are just looking for every opportunity to get mad at the party for not doing what you think they should do while you sit on your couch and don't do anything, right? Like that's a reality, right? But there's also the reality that like what we're doing is not doing enough to instill confidence and hope that we will do what we say we're going to do. Because like the Democrat Party has the worst approval rating I think that they've ever had. But I still think that there's some concern. Like even like talk about Trump, right? There's a lot more higher approval rating for Trump than there is the Republican Party. So we have to think about this, right? There's stuff that we can do locally here in the state of Maine to reestablish and get people to believe in what we're doing as a Republican Party in order to get people to want to show up to vote. I think that's one of the biggest things is like, if we can't win our own base, right, to have them recognize the value of what we're doing and have us prove to them that we're working really hard for them as a party, then they're not going to want to, they're not going to want to show up to vote. I mean, voter enthusiasm is one of the biggest issues that's impacting, despite the craziness of the people on the left, their base is motivated and mobilized and will do anything and will affirm anything that their party does for the most part. Again, like Maduro, narco terrorist, right? And when the U.S. goes and takes him out, and they're like want him to be free and for him to be able to unjustly rule over the nation he was really never duly elected to, because their party tells them to, right? On our side, I'm not saying we want mindless people, but like we get mad about like really small things about like and decide that we want to go to war with one another, and so we have our own problems, but we have a better message, and our people need to be more motivated. They need to put up with things that they don't like, people that might frustrate them, knowing that we're all on the same team and we need to work together. So I think we need to do a better job, and we're trying to do this here in Cumberland County. We're trying to put on events that bring people together, that show that there's hope, that there's positivity. You mentioned the Lincoln Day dinner. We had, doubled the attendance we've ever had before in that event. So like there is a lot. I mean, a lot of that has to do with good old Steve Robinson and the draw that he is at this point. But part of it also is the enthusiasm that is building here in Cumberland County. Cumberland County, I'll remind you, is the worst county for Republicans in our state. I think we have the most Republicans, but we also have so many more Democrats. The percentage is much higher Democrat to Republican. But people are coming out. People are feeling hopeful that maybe there's a possibility we can turn the tide here. And I think we need to continue to build that with people. We need to earn trust, build trust, and demonstrate that we actually do what we say we're going to do. Yeah.
And you know, local like today happen Lewiston. So much more important than anything that's even going to happen on the federal level. You know, I've said it for, you know, a long time. All politics is local. Your local school committee has more influence on your family than anything that's going to happen in Washington. Your local select board or city council has more effect on your family or anything that's going to happen in Congress or the Senate today. And people just need to, you know, get out and vote, be aware of what's going on in their school committees, because school committee is probably the most, you know, people say, oh, running for president or governor, or I want to be a U.S. senator. You can make more impact in your community by being the voice of reason on your local school committee and going, no, guys, we're not doing this. This is wrong, and we know it's wrong. You can make more impact even on your local boards of health or your city councils by just being the one person in the room going, can we take another look at this? Can we review this? It might not be the right thing. You know, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, they're not going to change my day-to-day life that much. But if the local planning board comes in and wants to rezone, you know, my street into a commercial district, it has huge impacts on me. And I think a lot of people just don't focus on it, you know, because the national offices get the spotlight. But hey, all the work and the damage that's been done in Maine, a lot of it's been done on the local and the state level. And, you know, people need to pay attention to that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, it's one of the reasons that we try to focus on what's going on here in the state. We try to interview school board members, city council members for candidates, because that actually is, to your point, part of the problem, right? And part of the problem is the mainstream media. And this is where again, what the Maine Wire is doing is great, because they're actually focused on those smaller things. The mainstream media, most media tends to push you to what's going on nationally rather than what's going on in your backyard. And we need to be more aware of what's going on in our backyard. We need to do the difficult work of, you don't even have to run for office. Go to a school board meeting on a regular basis. Go to a city council meeting, or at least pay attention to them. Most of them are available online. See what they're talking about. See what's going on, and see where you can step up and have an impact in your local community, in addition to voting. So, all that, let's get out there. Let's do it. If you like this type of content, people, please like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. There'll be some shorts that'll come out. Do the same with those. Jon, thanks you so much for coming on. Look forward to having you on a little bit more regularly. And thank you for all that you're doing with the Maine Wire and taking the risks being out there.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you for everything that you do, because, you know, having this platform is extremely important, and, you know, credit to you and all of your hard work, and it's much appreciated. And thank you to your audience for listening.
Yeah, thank you all. And we'll see you back here. I think on Thursday, I've got an interview with a congressional candidate, Josh. I can't pronounce his last name, but he's running for CD1, I should say. I think it's Petrovich or something along those lines. But we'll see you